The map to my family's lost gold mine was the final piece she needed to build a future with him. A truth that revealed itself not in a dramatic confrontation, but in the cold, precise data of a corrupted GPS file. A digital ghost haunting the logs of our shared computer. The Arizona sun, where my great-grandfather Elias Thorne had chased his ruin, was a brutal, honest thing. It baked the red rock and exposed every fissure, every shadow. It didn't allow for the soft, curated lies that had grown in the shade of my own life for the past 5 years. Those lies began to crack under that same sun, during what I thought was just another weekend of hopeful futility. My inheritance was not a deed or a stock portfolio, but a story. A ghost story written in the cramped, feverish script of a dying man. Elias's journal was a family relic, kept in a fireproof box more out of duty than belief. My father called it a curse. He'd say, "It's a tale that makes men stupid, Leo. It makes them see gold in pyrite and trust in wolves." I, the romantic, the dreamer, saw it as a puzzle, a connection to a wilder, more consequential past. On our wedding night, in a roadside motel near the very mountains that haunted the journal's pages, I showed it to Sophia. The room smelled of cheap cleaning products and the fried food from the diner next door. But when I laid the brittle pages on the scratchy bedspread, the world narrowed to the circle of lamplight and her face. Her eyes, the color of dark honey in that warm light, widened. I explained the clues: the eagle's shadow, the spring of iron and regret, the sleeping bear stone. "This is my past," I whispered, my voice thick with a hope so vast it felt like fear. "And I want it to be our future. We'll find it together. Build something real. Something that lasts." She touched the faded ink with a reverence that sealed my heart. "Our secret," she said, and kissed me. It was a covenant. For years, it was the spine of our marriage. We were amateur archaeologists of our own potential. Weekends meant the dusty, sunlit quiet of historical society archives, tracing the faded lines of old survey maps. Vacations were hiking trips into the unforgiving spine of the Rockies, boots crunching on scree, comparing the stark, beautiful landmarks to Elias's cryptic poetry. We papered one wall of our living room with topographical maps, a constellation of red string and push pins and hope. It wasn't really about the gold, not then. It was about the U.S. The shared purpose, the private language of clues we developed, the dream of a legacy we would literally unearth side by side. My job as a land surveyor fed both our bills and my skills for the search. Hers as a librarian honed the patience for the archival slog. We were a perfect, balanced team. Then the catalyst arrived, wrapped in the familiar guise of an old friend. Mateo. Sophia had known him since childhood, a smart, ambitious boy from her hometown who had become a geologist, or had trained to be one. When he reappeared, he was a ghost of that potential, a little too thin, his clothes a little too worn, his smile a little too quick, and not quite reaching his eyes. She ran into him at the grocery store, she said. He was down on his luck, between jobs, his confidence shaken. "He could help us, Leo," she pleaded, her hand warm on my arm. "He knows rocks, mineralogy, formations. We've been playing amateur detectives for years. He could give us real science." I was hesitant. This was our quest, our secret garden. Letting a third person in felt like a violation of that wedding night covenant. But I saw the earnest light in her eyes, and fool that I was, I mistook it for a shared, burning dedication to our dream. I mistook it for love. I invited the wolf in, believing I was welcoming a shepherd. Mateo was charming in his ragged way, self-deprecating, with a sharp, analytical mind that quickly dissected Elias's prose. He pored over the journal not as a story but as a technical document. "This iron-tasting spring," he said, tapping the page. his finger leaving a faint smudge. That's not just poetic. High iron content could indicate a specific hydrothermal activity, often associated with mineral deposition in this region. Your great-grandfather might not have known the geology, but he was a damn good observer. He made the fantasy feel probable. He reignited the hunt, but with a new, professional fervor that left me slightly behind. I became the bank. New high-precision GPS units, sophisticated soil sampling kits, a subscription to a premium satellite imagery service. I wrote the checks, seeing it as an investment in the future Sophia and I would share. Mateo became a fixture in our home, for dinners that stretched long into the night, filled with talk of lithology, fault lines, and isotopic analysis, a language I only half understood. I'd sit there, sipping my beer, watching them, their heads bent close over a map, speaking in a rapid, excited shorthand. The pang I felt wasn't jealousy. Not then. It was exclusion. Our quiet, shared puzzle had become a technical operation, and my role was shrinking to financier and pack mule. I dismissed it as my own insecurity. They were excited. We were a team. We were closer than ever to the dream. The first crack was so small, so technical, it seemed innocuous. I was uploading our weekend's GPS tracks to our shared cloud drive, a meticulous digital log we kept to avoid retreading old ground. The syncing software flashed a minor error. A file conflict. 2 files from the same date. From the same device, Sophia's personal GPS unit, but with different data. One was the track I remembered. A straightforward loop up the main trail of Canyon Creek, the hike we'd all taken together. The other was a longer, more intricate route, spidering deep into a treacherous side canyon we had explicitly agreed was too dangerous to attempt that day. The timestamp showed it recorded the same Saturday, but the data stream continued for a full 3 hours after our agreed-upon turnaround time. A cold trickle, like meltwater, seeped into my gut. I checked our shared calendar. That Saturday, Sophia had told me she needed a long, solitary hike to clear her head after a minor argument we'd had about money. Mateo, she'd mentioned casually, was helping a friend move. A simple, explainable discrepancy. She changed her mind, explored further, forgot to mention it. But the precision of the earlier lie, the emphasis on solitude, curdled in my stomach. Why specify being alone if you were just going for a hike? I didn't confront her. A new, colder instinct took over. As a surveyor, I lived in a world of data, of precise measurement and immutable records. If there was a truth to be found, it would be in the numbers, not in tears or explanations. I began to observe with my tools, not my heart. I set up a simple, hidden log on our home computer to track file access. I saw that high-resolution satellite images of a specific, remote grid Square One Mateo had offhandedly dismissed in our group meetings as low probability were downloaded repeatedly, always from Sophia's user profile, always between the hours of 11 p.m. and 2 a.m., when I was usually asleep. I found a draft email in her account's trash folder. It was addressed to an unfamiliar Gmail address, m.tgo@assayegmail.com. The subject line was Assay Result, Quadrant D7. There was no body text, only an attachment, a PDF from a private, expensive geological assay firm in Denver, a firm I had never contacted, and whose invoice I had certainly never paid. The report detailed the composition of a rock sample, noting trace elements consistent with proximal epithermal gold deposition. Quadrant D7 was not on our shared string-covered wall map. It was on a separate, clean, laminated topographic chart I'd seen rolled and tucked in the side pocket of Mateo's worn-out backpack. The betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It was a hidden map, and I was slowly, painfully learning to read its contours. They were running a parallel operation. One track, well-funded and fruitless, was where I diligently, trustingly trudged. The other, secret and promising, was where they raced ahead together, using my money to fund their private search. The woman I loved, the librarian with the honey eyes who had marveled at our secret, had become a cartographer of deceit. She was plotting a course to a future, but I was no longer the destination. The emotional avalanche, when it came, was triggered by a single term of endearment. We were on a team camping trip at the mouth of Redfern Canyon, a location Mateo had been pushing for weeks based on new hydrological models. The atmosphere was strained, a thin veneer of camaraderie over a deep, unspoken tension. After a silent dinner, I retired to my tent early, pleading a headache. Through the thin nylon, I heard their murmured voices by the dying embers of the fire. The words were indistinct, but the tone was intimate, a low, conspiratorial hum. Then, the sound of a zipper, a backpack, and the rustle of paper. And then, Sophia's voice, clear and soft in the vast cold silence of the mountain night. "This is it. The final triangulation. The journal's sleeping bear. Mateo, my love, we're standing right on top of it." My love. The air left my lungs as if I'd been struck. The world telescoped down to those two words, spoken with a tender, possessive familiarity she had not used with me in months. They weren't just betraying me. They were building a new language, a new world, on the bones of my family's dream. In that instant, the full map revealed itself. Mateo, the brilliant but failed geologist, needed a claim, a fortune to restart his life, to become the man he believed he should be. Sophia, my wife, had looked at our life, the quiet dedication, the slow, plodding search, and found it wanting. She had chosen the sharper, harder, more promising instrument. I was the mark, the trusting husband with a family legend and a steady, dependable paycheck. Their plan was elegant in its cruelty. Use my resources, my heritage, my trust, to find the mine. Then the professional geologist, Mateo, would stumble upon the location on a solo survey, file the claim in his name, and legally cut me out. My marriage, my 5 years of devotion, were merely the grubstake for their new beginning. The grief was instantaneous and total, a black hole swallowing the light of my last decade. But from that absolute darkness emerged something else, a rage as deep, patient, and immutable as the bedrock beneath us. It was a geological rage. They wanted a gold mine? Fine, I would give them one. I would teach them the true cost of extraction. I became a ghost in my own life. I didn't confront them. I played my part to perfection, the dedicated, slightly oblivious Leo, more enthusiastic than ever, full of clumsy ideas about new search grids. I leaned into their perception of me as the well-meaning bumbler. Meanwhile, my real work began. Using my surveying expertise, I started a campaign of subtle sabotage. I began altering the coordinates in our shared digital logs, introducing tiny, random errors, a few meters here, a false elevation reading there, just enough to make their secret, parallel triangulations frustratingly unstable, to send them on wild goose chases. I intercepted the next soil sample Sophia secretly collected for their private assay. While she was in the shower, I switched the contents with sediment from a known barren creek bed miles away. The expensive assay would come back worthless, sowing doubt and wasting their time and my money. While I hindered them, I began my own silent hunt. If they were so close, the real location had to be within the radius of their secret focus. I stopped looking for eagles and sleeping bears. I started looking for them. I tracked their hidden digital trail they'd gotten sloppy, using a different cloud folder but one that was still linked to our home network. The data led me to a place not on any of our official maps, a narrow, almost invisible defile off the main Redfern Canyon, known locally as the Gut. It was a grim, shadowy crack in the earth. Following their GPS points, I found it, a small cairn of stones, too deliberate to be natural. My hands were steady as I dismantled it. Inside a weatherproof bag was a rock sample. Not just any rock. A chunk of quartz, and running through its heart was a vein of gold so bright, so pure, it seemed to pulse with a light of its own. Elias Thorne's lost vein. My inheritance. I held it in my palm. It was heavier than its mass suggested. It held the weight of generations, of betrayal, of a love that had turned out to be fool's gold. I felt no joy, no triumph, only a cold, surgical clarity. I took detailed photographs with my phone, the GPS coordinates automatically embedded in the metadata. I used my geologist's hammer to chip off a small definitive piece for myself. Then, with meticulous care, I returned the sample bag to the cairn, rebuilding it stone by stone until it looked utterly untouched. Now, I possessed the truth, and they were walking into a trap of my design. The final act required a stage. I suggested a make-or-break expedition to a broad, barren valley miles away from the Gutta location I had spent weeks doctoring logs and maps to make appear promising. I played the role of the excited novice, spreading out my falsified charts, my eyes wide with manufactured hope. They exchanged a glance, a brief flash of pity and condescension I was meant to see, before eagerly agreeing. "Fantastic initiative, Leo," Matteo said, clapping me on the back, his grip just a little too tight. "Your instincts are improving." The hypocrisy was a sour tang in the air. The day before we left, I filed a mining claim. Not for the true location at the Gut, but for a worthless adjacent parcel of land that bordered our fake target area. I used a newly created LLC, Rockhound Prospecting, a shell with no traceable connection to me. The paperwork was a decoy, a piece of bait floating in the bureaucratic water. We set up base camp in the false location. The tension was palpable, a live wire humming with their secret knowledge and my false enthusiasm. On the second morning, I announced I was going to scout a promising ridge to the north. Instead, I pushed my body to a brutal pace, hiking directly to the Gut. There, under the relentless sun, I became the model of a legitimate prospector. Using official claim posts and signage from my surveying supplies, I staked the area. It was a public, visible, and legally binding act. I posted the notice of my Rockhound prospecting claim in a sealed PVC tube at the site, as per regulations. I made it unmistakably clear that this location was now taken. Then I planted my final piece of evidence. Not at the true vein, which I left carefully concealed, but in a shallow, obvious scrape of earth right on the claim boundary. I placed a single, stunning piece of gold-veined quartz, identical to the sample I'd found. A cruel little treasure, impossible to miss. I returned to camp filthy and exhausted, my performance of dejection perfected. "Anything?" Sophia asked, her voice taut as a tripwire. "Nothing," I sighed, shaking my head, avoiding her eyes. "Just more shale and false hope. This whole valley is dead." I saw the smirk they tried to hide, the shared, triumphant glance that passed between them. Their patience with the charade was wearing thin. The real prize was waiting. The next day, Matteo remembered an anomalous reading from an earlier solo trip in a different direction. He and Sophia packed light, moving with a brisk, focused energy that had nothing to do with a leisurely hike. I knew their destination. I gave them a 4-hour head start, then followed, moving with a silent, practiced stealth along the high ridges, a specter observing the ruin of his own life. I found a vantage point overlooking the Gut. Through my binoculars, I watched their arrival. I saw the moment they saw the claim posts. Matteo's body stiffened. He rushed forward, ripped the notice from the tube and read it. His face transformed from confusion to disbelief, then to a rage so pure it twisted his features. Sophia snatched the paper from him. Her hands trembled violently. Then, in a fit of impotent fury, Matteo kicked over one of the sturdy claim posts, a stupid, illegal, and utterly telling act. He fumbled with his portable spectrometer, its needle dancing as he scanned the ground frantically. It led him unerringly to the rock I had planted. He snatched it up, held it to the sun. The gold flashed, a mocking wink. He let out a strangled animal cry of anguish, and thrust the rock toward Sophia, as if accusing her. The argument that erupted was not a quiet disagreement. It was a seismic event. Their shared dream, built on deceit, shattered under the weight of a greater theft. "You said this area was clean. You said no one else knew," Mateo roared, spittle flying. "Who is Rockhound? Did you talk? Did you get drunk and tell one of your librarian friends?" "Me? This was your operation, your contacts, your secure assays," Sophia screamed back, her voice raw, tears of rage streaking the dust on her cheeks. "You arrogant fool! You must have bragged to someone in a bar. You've lost it. You've lost everything for us." The word "us" hung in the dry air, the most damning evidence of all. They tore into each other, the stress of their long deception and the agony of seeing their prize legally vanish, turning their alliance to ash and venom. The tender "my love" of the campsite was gone, devoured by the golden monster they had sought. I watched until the sun began its descent, casting long distorted shadows that seemed to bind them together in their misery. Then I slipped away, unseen. I returned to camp, packed my gear with methodical calm, and left. I didn't wait. I drove the winding mountain roads back to the city, back to the house that was now just a structure, filled with the ghosts of a false future. She returned alone the next evening, a shell of the woman I'd married. Her eyes were red-rimmed and empty. "He's gone," she said, her voice flat. "Mateo. He blamed me. He took all the data, the last of the good equipment, and just left." I poured her a glass of water, my face a mask of concerned confusion. "What happened? Did you two have a fight? Over the search?" She looked at me then, a long, searching gaze, as if seeing me for the first time. She was looking for a flicker of knowledge, of guilt, of triumph. She saw nothing. Only the earnest, worried face of Leo, the dependable cuckold. Her shoulders slumped in absolute defeat. "It's over, Leo," she whispered, a fresh tear cutting a path through the dust. "The dream, it's gone. Someone else found it." She broke down then, sobbing in a way I'd never seen, not the gentle tears of our shared struggles, but the wrenching, ugly cries of total loss. I held her because the man I had been would have done so. The man I was now felt nothing but a vast, silent, and perfectly engineered stillness. The aftermath was a quiet dissolution. The shared purpose that had bound us was exposed as a toxic lie. We sold the house, divided the remnants of our savings, what was left after funding their betrayal. She moved to another state, a blank space on a map I no longer cared to read. I kept the small piece of gold quartz. It sits on my desk now, not as a paperweight for dreams, but as a paperweight for reality. A cold, hard, and beautiful reminder. They had the map, the skill, the secret, and each other. But I had the patience, the history, and the cold, geological fury of a man who finally understood he was not a partner in a dream, but a resource to be mined, processed, and discarded. The real gold, it turns out, wasn't in the mountain. It was in the lesson, written in the unyielding stone of betrayal. Some veins, once exposed to the corrosive air of treachery, are best left buried forever, lest you poison everything you try to build upon them.